Hello, everyone. My name is Richard Capone. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Let's Go Learn. And today I'd like to welcome you to our No More Copy and Paste webinar. We're very excited to be holding this webinar with International Case. And today we have a few people on. But let me go over some logistical stuff first before we get started. So first of all, if you are having any problems with audio or any major failures, don't worry. We are recording this session. So we will be emailing a recording of this video of the webinar as well as the slides tomorrow to everyone, okay? Also, on the upper right part of your screen, there is a nav bar for GoToWebinar. You'll see a little orange arrow. If you click on that orange arrow, the panel will slide off the screen. So that way it's not covering the screen. If you click on it again, it'll slide on. You can type in any question. So if you have some logistical problems right now, we do have Alicia and Linda on who can help you in the chat. They could go ahead and help you if you're having some problems. But also you will use the question chat box to type in questions, which we'll answer at the very end. All right. So again, hopefully you're all coming on. It looks like a lot of people are joining right now. But again, we will be recording everything. And if you need a closed caption version of the webinar, you can email us and we'll send you a separate link with a closed caption version of the webinar. All right, so what I'd like to do first is introduce Phyllis Wolfram, who is the Executive Director of CASE, and she's going to go ahead and kick things off for us, and then we'll start. Phyllis.
Hi, Richard. Thank you so very much, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. You're in for a real treat. Kurt has got some great tips for you today. Our webinar is, of course, no more copy and paste and how to end copying and pasting within your IEP documents. So we want to welcome you, but first I want to say a special thank you to Richard, the CEO, and Kurt, the National Director for Let's Go Learn, and the great partnership that we have, the support that they provide to CASE. It's just been great over the last year, and we are thoroughly honored and pleased to be a partner and have you as a friend of CASE, Richard. So we just want to thank you personally for all that you do, not just for the CASE members, but for everyone in education, and how hard you work to provide the supports and the resources for those of us in the field. So thank you very much. And at this time, I'm just going to toss it over to Kurt, and he's going to get started.
Well, thank you, Phyllis. Right. I appreciate everything you do at CASE and all of your amazing leadership. So thank you, thank you. And we're just going to hop right into this guy. Essentially, the no copy and paste to me represents, I guess, my biggest bugaboo when it comes to special education, when it comes to educating children in general. Richard, can you progress the slide?
Yeah, do you want to do the poll questions first?
Oh, yeah. Why don't we do that? You're totally right.
Yeah, we have 3 questions we're going to do. And so let me go ahead and make sure I could do this properly. So everyone, this is the interactive part. You're going to see a question popping up on your screen. And there you go. So go ahead and answer the question as quickly as you can, and we'll share the results. So the question is, what is your role at your organization? Okay, looks like almost everyone has voted. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it, and I'll go ahead and share results. So it looks like 18% are directors of special education, 16% administrators, coordinators 27%, consultants 10%, and teachers 29%. Great. So let's go ahead and we have 2 more questions. And let me launch the next one. So what percentage closest represents how often you estimate that teachers copy and paste from one IEP to another? So please go ahead and fill this out. Ooh, I get to see the live streaming of these as they come in. Interesting. So, all right, 75%, 78% is voted. All right, I'll close, show results. This is interesting. So the median is under 25 to 50%, you think, copy and paste. That's a 37% did that, and 51 to 75% of teachers copy and paste is 28%. So that's, you know, those are big numbers. All right, so this is definitely a relevant topic, Kurt. All right, last question. All right, last question here. Let me launch it. What do you think are the top 2 reasons for copy and paste? You can select multiple choices here, so select 2. And the choices are not enough training overall, new teachers need better training and support, tools not good enough, teachers have too much paperwork, lack of organizational procedures and or guidance. All right, I am going to close the poll. 3, 2, 1, close. Share results. All right, so interesting. Number 1 reason is teachers have too much paperwork. The number 2 reason, lack of organizational procedures and or guidance. And then the close third is not enough training overall. And then we have the next one is new teachers need better training and support. And finally, tools not good enough. All right. So there you go. Thank you for that input, everyone. All right, Kurt, take it away.
Yeah, thanks everybody for your input. You know, to me, it's surprising even how high those estimates are. I mean, 86% of the folks on this webinar today, you know, and estimate that more than 25% of the time we're copying and pasting as we're building these IEPs, individualized IEPs. And so let me just, from my perspective, what is the copy and paste phenomenon? And it's not something we're going to find in IDEA or any state regs anywhere. You know, it's, to me, it's a really scary thing that is very pervasive throughout the US today in special education, and the consequences can be really significant. So, but let me kind of back up for a second and talk about how I think we got here. So, you know, in 1975, we roll out IDEA, and it's all about individualization, and there's a lot of fear around, can we truly do this with every special education student around the country? But it goes into place, and it doesn't start right at 75. You know, in 77, the regs come in, and then a little bit after that, they start implementing. And when I came into being a special education teacher, we actually did them on triplicate. We, you know, we didn't have these softwares and all of that good stuff. Quite frankly, the internet had only been invented a couple years before I started teaching. I'm going to age myself a little bit. But when you did them on triplicate and on paper, there was no way, obviously, to copy and paste. You had to individualize everything because you were quite literally writing in pen every single one of them. So when I was, again, in the classroom, I never really saw that. What then happened in the late 90s, we have the inception of the internet, and not the inception in the late 90s, but we have the beginnings of software coming into the market, and obviously in the 2000s. And as we progress with software and these big IEP software systems, what I started noticing as an administrator, assistant principal, and really as a principal as well, what I started noticing was that the wrong names were in the IEPs. You know, again, they'd been copied and pasted from one IEP to another. So, you know, my fear is if a parent is sitting there and they see the wrong name, immediately it's clear that it wasn't written for this child. So what we end up getting, though, as we have moved year to year to year in this software culture, which has a lot of benefits, but what we've moved toward are non-individualized, fancy-sounding IEPs with lots of colorful language, but in my experience, quite often not being tracked, quite often no actual baselines, quite often no good data for it to drive the IEP, and a lot of replication from IEP to IEP. So, you know, go ahead and advance us forward there, Richard, if you will. So, you know, what are the drivers? You know, what has created this culture where we're not individualizing? And it's a couple pretty dynamic things. So, you know, we've always talked about too much paperwork. There is an awful lot of paperwork. So if you can copy and paste something, or you can just use a drop down over and over that you think is good, it saves you time, obviously, and you're not having to replicate or build this IEP from scratch. And there are some spots of the IEP where if it's just generic language, I think that's okay. But again, if it's individualized for the child, you can't copy and paste from child to child. Too little time for administrative work. I think, again, as teachers, there's never enough time for this type of work. Lack of training. In my experience, in my undergraduate work and graduate work, we didn't get a lot of training in this. And schools are super busy. My experience, special education directors and principals are always fighting to find time to train them because the teachers are so busy. Convenience is another issue. It's just convenient and easy, again, to copy and paste and to get that IEP built quickly. And then this is the one that probably concerns me the most, is that I believe a lot of folks at the end of the day come to see an IEP as just this perfunctory legal document that we have to create. Again, it sounds good, we'll give it to the parent, but there's not a lot of intention of having it truly drive the education. And again, that's deeply concerning to me. So let's move on to that next slide. So typical red flags. So if you're an administrator, you're a special education director, you're a principal, assistant principal, you know, what can tip you off, or what would tip off an auditor, somebody coming in? I do quite a bit of auditing of districts across the country, and I just wanted to share a few things that jump out at me immediately when I'm reviewing a case manager's caseload. So I might grab 4 IEPs from a specific case manager, and some of the things, again, that jump out: wrong name in the IEP, immediately, that's a big issue, and it should raise considerable concern for the parent. Overuse of same goals throughout a case manager's student IEPs. So, you know, comprehension is important, but if every single kid has the exact same goal and there isn't a different baseline for that goal in the PLAF or connected to that goal, well, then it's not individualized. That's a huge issue. The outcome or desired proficiency of the goal is the same for all goals. I see this quite a bit, where every goal is 70%. You know, 70% is passing for a number of districts. And so what you start seeing is the overuse of 70%. And again, if you're getting baselines, it's not always going to be 70%, or most of the time it won't be. No baselines in the PLAF. Of course, we should have all of our data that tells us about the kiddo's strengths and weaknesses in the present level, so we can then link that data to the annual goals or short-term objectives. If there's no baseline, one, how do you build an IEP? How do you track goals? Again, if there's no baseline, and it usually indicates to me a lot of work was not done up front to get the data. Broad grade-based goals for overall content area. I come across this a lot in high schools, where it essentially says, very broad statement, Bill will, you know, make progress in overall scientific methodology, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it is basically a grade. They set it at 70%, and essentially the goal is to pass the class. Well, general ed kids and special education kids all get grades. We don't need a goal that just measures overall grades for a class. That's an issue. Broad, nebulous statements used in the PLAF. So whenever I see, you know, he's a really nice kid, he gets along with others, he enjoys athletics, again, not specific to the kiddo, not really going into detail. And if it's clear that a lot of conversation wasn't had either with the parents or the child, or a lot of knowledge is being brought forth, to me, that can be a red flag. No true description of how the child's disability impacts the child in the regular education environment. So I see tons of copy and paste here. The child has a disability, therefore the child needs specially designed instruction to make progress in math, English, science, all that. Well, that's not how the disability is impacting the child. And that statement should be a bit different for every child because all disabilities don't manifest the same. The services, PLAF, and goals do not link. I see this all the time where, again, I might have in a PLAF that the kiddo has all elevated T-scores, the BASC-3 scores are super high, a lot of clinical scoring with a lot of concern, and then there might be one goal and there are no social skills. You know, basically the services don't match the deficits, and the goals aren't set taking into mind the baselines, or they weren't collected at all. So that's very common, and that's what we call internal consistency. And lastly, the same broad language is used to describe how each goal is to be measured. So I see this quite a bit. It just says data collection by classroom teacher, or again, this broad statement that accompanies every goal. We're supposed to say how we're going to actually measure that goal, when we're going to measure that goal, and be specific about that. That often indicates to me that there's no data that's being collected. All right, let's move to the next one. All right, how to avoid copy and paste culture. Number one, must have a review process for accountability. You know, what you treasure, you measure. Now, I'm not saying review every IEP that goes through a school. What I'm saying is grab a few, and in the beginning, you'll find a lot of errors, but it's a great opportunity to support and coach the teachers. They want to grow, they want support, they want to know how to do it better, but you have to have a review process to give that feedback in ongoing coaching. Number two, must set expectations for educators with regards to IEP development. So, you know, I ask teachers all the time, so how many goals are you expected to write? I don't know. Do they want one per content area? Do they want two? Is it based on deficit? What are the expectations for the PLAF? I don't know. You know, if we want and expect a really robust PLAF, we need to train and give those expectations, give examples, and be really specific. There are also some ways to write goals that are very simple, straightforward, and easy to measure. So often I see these flowery goals that talk about 4 out of 5 trials, and you know, essentially you're collecting data, looks like weekly, and that can be an awful lot. So number three, must have ongoing PD to support the growth of skills for special education teachers and administrators. Again, we do, for the most part, a deficient job of training our folks in the most litigious area of education today. We have got to figure out and get our superintendents and folks on board with supporting the special education directors and principals in implementing this training. Number four, must have a system for collecting new data every year to establish baselines. So obviously, we don't have to fully evaluate, we have to consider evaluating every 3 years. I go in all the time and review IEPs, and there's no baseline for that year. And quite often, the newest data might be 2 years old. Well, again, how do you drive goals? How do you develop goals? And how do you develop a quality PLAF if you haven't collected new and solid data, at least at the beginning of the year? And then two, how are you going to demonstrate progress at the end of the year if you didn't measure it at the beginning? Must have a system to progress monitor goals that doesn't involve teacher-made quizzes and tests. Now, this isn't always popular, but most of them are not psychometrically speaking reliable and valid. There's huge variances in the difficulty of quizzes and tests that different teachers make. So the measuring criteria would change every single year. And what I find is that it's tough to consistently measure, so we don't know what progress they're making. I really like standardized instruments. They're quick, great data, and they give you the data you need. Number six, educators must truly understand internal consistency. So what this means is that you need to think about the IEP in a linear, connected way. So often we develop each component separately, and again, they don't connect. When I read a PLAF, if it talks about deficits in reading comprehension, oral reading fluency, word problems, and certain behaviors, well, I expect to see goals that link to that. And then the goals should be based on the data and the baselines that were captured in that PLAF. And so often, I just don't see those connections. It should all make sense. And then 7, educators must be trained on how to write and measure goals for major areas. So behavior is a great area where, you know, to me, what I like to measure is if we want to see verbal outbursts decrease, then I want to see the baseline. Let's say it's 9 per hour, you know, whatever metric we want to use. Well, then I want to see an increase in the replacement behavior. We don't do this particularly well. We don't collect data. And what does this all result in? State complaints, unhappy parents, potential due process, potential litigation. And being on the other end of a due process hearing when you don't have data can be a very painful experience. And there are just so many little things we can do to completely avoid those types of situations. And the most important reason is because these IEPs matter. They affect children. We essentially are asking the parents to trust us. And if we're not doing a quality job, that's impacting the child. All right, next slide. Okay, so what I just wanted to kind of point out is we address the great majority of these areas at Let's Go Learn. So when you look at like number 3, we provide extensive PD. When we look at collecting baselines, we do diagnostic assessment and we capture all of that information. Must have a system to progress monitor. Again, we have major diagnostics, and then we have very small discrete assessments at the skill level to track those goals. So again, there's just an awful lot that we focus in on to address these areas. And then, you know, why LGL now? Why would you want to consider looking into the tools for Let's Go Learn? And essentially for us, the technology has come so far that we can now develop, for example, individualized goals and short-term objectives that have the baselines built into the goal and are individualized for every child. We have narrative PLAFs that explain the data, and then dynamic progress monitoring, and all of this is because of the technology that we have. And I'd like for Richard to talk about our technology and just some of the tools so you can have a sense of the options you have to addressing many of these areas.
All right, thank you, Kurt. And by the way, everyone, we will email you the slides tomorrow, so you don't have to worry about it if you didn't take everything down. Those 7 tips were great, Kurt. I think that's really going to help people with, you know, adjusting their reform efforts. I want to talk about the technology. I'm only going to do a few minutes, and then we're going to jump into our Q&A final portion where you could ask Kurt questions or myself. But we really are at an interesting point in technology because, you know, technology assessment has advanced dramatically, and it's allowing a lot of these tools to really be used in a new way, where I'd say in the past, a lot of assessment was really more accountability based. This really is important because now the assessments that are available, especially our platform, really integrate with the stuff that Kurt was talking about. So let me just sort of show you. I have four slides, and that's it. So first of all, this is the Let's Go Learn special education process. We start off with granular diagnostic assessment that'll feed your PLAF. It gives you data, qualitative and quantitative. That data is going to help you with your IEPs. Our customers tell us that it cuts down the IEP writing time by 50% or more. And then afterwards, it could drive SDI, so data-driven personalized instruction. That's another piece that we're not necessarily talking about today, but we do have automatic courses, an automatic reading and math course for every single student. But then more importantly, the next piece is progress monitoring. Now, this is completely integrated, and I'll show this to you in a second. And then finally, you have these one-click progress monitoring reports. So this whole thing is our platform. It's what we're trying to do, and of course, there's professional development tied into it. So let me talk about those 3 points that Kurt brought up. Number 4, getting accurate baselines, right? So the key here is having granular data, an assessment that was designed as a diagnostic, right? You want data that everyone could understand. So our scores are all in grade level scores. They're also norm reference as well. But this is really important because it means that everyone could understand the data. And let me just sort of show you real quickly. In reading, when you get a student's profile, regardless of the student's age, we assess, we find their present level within these 7 subtests, or actually 6 are shown here, of reading. So even if they're a ninth grader, we go down and up and we find exactly where they're at, right? This is really important. Now, in the case of mathematics, math is broken up into 44 subtests. So we go through and find exactly the student's present level within each of these bars, which in essence, when you look at these bars, these are a stack of skills and concepts, right? So if somebody is right here, we know this directly translates to a specific skill or concept. And this is really important. Our assessments are built on a diagnostic model, not a summative model, right? What's interesting, we hear so many schools now are moving away from having to use large accountability scale assessments for special education, which is a great thing, right? So there really is a shift. The other piece here, number 5, talking about turnkey progress monitoring. One thing that we do is whether you are doing a full assessment, a quiz, or a subtest diagnostic, all the data rolls into the same baseline data at the beginning of the year. So you can do pre-post progress monitoring at any point in time. Now, this is really key, right? If I'm testing short vowel, for instance, I've worked on a student, I'm supposed to be working on phonics. I know that short vowel, I can queue up that quiz, but that short vowel sits inside of the phonics subtest, and it has a score of 1.5, grade level mid first grade. So when you have an assessment system that is all designed in the same vertically aligned data set, you can do instant progress monitoring and the teacher doesn't have to worry about it. In the past, the teacher would do a quiz and they wouldn't know how that data applies back into the baseline data. We've taken that all out. It's all integrated, all right? The last thing here is number 7, talking about writing and measuring short-term goals. As soon as a student does an assessment, whether reading and math, teacher clicks on the button, they view the goal setting report, they toggle between present level or instructional skills, and they could say, Maria is going to be, the next thing she's working on is correctly rounding, and then after that, she'll be working on rounding tens, hundreds, and thousands. Within place value, she's going to be working on 2-digit numbers, and after that, she'll be working on 3-digit numbers. These are your short-term goals, right? So it's all data today. Doesn't have to be just some generic number like if you took MAP and it says your student is at 725 in numbers in operation. No, that doesn't mean anything. When you take a true diagnostic assessment like ours that's integrated for special education, after doing that hour assessment, we know specifically what the student is supposed to be working on next, right? Hopefully that makes sense, because this is really, there's a big technology shift to make this happen. And I think a lot of times people don't know what to look for, but you don't need to settle for wishy-washy data nowadays, right? This is the next generation and this is what's here to stay. All right, so the way our system works, you have the assessments right here. They feed in and automatically in real time, they generate a personalized learning path, but also this is used for your IEP. As students take formative assessments, it feeds into the baseline data set. You always do real-time progress monitoring. And so it's really completely integrated. All right, so let me, the last thing I just want to mention too is, of course, in terms of professional development, we have a 6 to 7 hour certificated course that any principal or administrator can take that gives them the whole background on the special education process. And then also Kurt and our team will do a live on-site professional development trainings depending on different topics as well as virtual, all right? That is it. Now, I know we're trying to keep this to be a nice, concise, quick webinar, so that way you can get back to work. We're going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A right now. So Kurt and Phyllis, you could join us and let's see if we have some questions.
We do. This is Linda. And we do have a request for the slides. I know you're sending out the recording, but will you also send out the slides?
Yes, absolutely. We'll get those tomorrow.
Thanks so much. Do you think some of it comes from the push to use grade level standards for the goals? There are only so many standards, so kids end up with a lot of the same goals.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. And to that point, I will see, for example, inferencing. And again, they have to be standards based, but there's no deficit in inferencing. And then when I ask, so why are we tracking this for this kiddo? Why is this a specific goal? And the answer often is, well, I knew that he was struggling somewhat in reading and I just picked a standard. So the key is to finding the actual deficits. And for example, we actually provide the standard at the grade level the student is at. we also give it for their actual grade level. So if it's a 6th grader working at the 2nd grade level, we give you both standards so you can write those goals and track it from where they are. But again, it is tough, and I do think there is something to that because of the standards-based goals that we have to write.
What about the testing scores relating to classroom functioning?
Is there any clarification on that, Linda? What specifically they're asking?
Let's see. There were a couple of other questions from the same person. Do you have recommendations for standardized tests to progress monitor that are used state to state?
Okay, let me answer this. This is the problem with standardized testing to progress monitor. If you don't know where the student is and they're a 6th grader and you give them a 6th grade test, this is the problem. What I talked about, we have to get out of the mindset of using grade level standards-based testing. If the student is 3 levels below, a standardized testing is not at their present level. Now, the reason why we get in this position where you're even asking this question is because your district has adopted grade level benchmark tests. We can't do that in special education. It has to be, look, our assessments are K-12. So if you're an 8th grader, you're a 5th grader, it adapts up and down. And so this is where I'm saying you need to look for a system that is diagnostic and adjusts to students. Right?
And Richard, I go a step further and say, not just for students and disabilities, but for all students, that's important, because we want to see where all struggling learners, as well as all exceptional or gifted students, might be functioning as well, so that we're providing appropriate instruction to all students, including students with disabilities.
And this is where I've seen a shift in administrators. In the past, I've seen a lot of districts say everyone has to use MAP. Okay, not to bash MAP, but MAP is it's a good accurate assessment for what it's intended, accountability. But when they shove that into special education, that is legally wrong and it's academically wrong. So special education departments now are pushing back, saying, hey, we want our own assessment. Great, you need to use MAP for your overall accountability, but we need our own assessment that can adapt. And they're responding and saying, okay, because I think what's happening is they're realizing lawsuits, what's good for the kiddos. So they're doing adjustments. Yeah.
And just to clarify real quick too, what I'm also referencing is standardized assessments. So, there's a variety of standardized, and I really concur with what both Phyllis and Richard are saying, and that so often we use these, grade level, broad-based screening standardized tools like MAPs. And again, if you're at grade level, they're great. I mean, it's not going to give you much data since you're at grade level and you're proficient. What you need is a diagnostic tool that will adaptively go to multiple grade levels to find exactly that kiddo's point of knowledge when it comes to instruction, so you can also identify the next steps the kiddo needs to move forward. What I want about standardized is that, again, they controlled the sample, it was a research base, and it's valid and reliable.
Another question, thank you so much. Instead of teacher-made quizzes and tests, what are the resources to find good monitoring systems?
I'll take this one if y'all want.
Sure.
There's an awful lot out there. You really have to look closely to, and I'll tell you, like curriculum-based measures, like a true CBM, that is that 1-minute assessment, and I'll give you an example, like oral reading fluency. You have to be very careful because they don't adapt. You can do multiple assessments, but you might have to assess a kid with 6 of them to get to their grade level. And even then, it doesn't tell you what's going on. It'll tell you what you already know, which is the kid has a hard time reading fluently. You already knew that. What to me we need to get into is the diagnostic information. And to me, like the Woodcock-Johnson is very powerful. The type of assessment we do is essentially taking a tool like that and making it into something you can not only assess but progress monitor. And that key is getting a system that has the quick assessments that are linked specifically to those goals and deficits that are identified through the diagnostic process. So when you're evaluating tools, I'd love for you to look at Let's Go Learn, because again, we've designed it for special education, and we do reporting specific to special education. But if you're looking at general tools, again, you want to make sure there's a special ed focus. Do they have any special ed reporting, or is this a gen ed tool? A lot of times I call it the pass down effect. Richard alluded to it, where gen ed gets maps, and so then the district says, well, you use special ed, you use it too, since we're using it. Well, it doesn't meet our needs. And so often, again, it's just kind of like the pass me down clothes I used to get from my brother. It didn't fit, it did the job, but it didn't fit too well. We need it to fit for our kiddos.
That's a good analogy. I'll have to use that. We used to pass down my son's clothes to my daughter. She loves it though. So.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I do have a request. Somebody would like to unmute themselves. Would that be possible today? Or are you trying to conserve time? Would you like me to give out email address?
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible, but there's a long, like, hundreds of people's names, so I don't know if we can quickly click and unmute them. But if you could do it, go for it. Otherwise, just transcribe it. Unmute it. Let's ask the next question, and then you can get them queued up.
Okay.
Do you want to go back real quick to one of the questions, which was about the standardized assessments? What happens when you get an assessment that's from a different district and you don't have the information or the tools to use that same assessment to progress monitor?
Oh man, that's a great one. And that happens quite a bit. For me, if you can't because a lot of the tools we gather data, like the Woodcock-Johnson, you can't really progress monitor it because it's standard scores, and I've never seen a tool that you could progress monitor with standard scores. I mean, interesting concept, but I haven't seen it. So it does create an issue. What I would recommend, if the kiddo comes into your district, you want fresh data anyway. So you should have a system to assess your kids that is beyond clinical tools. You need to have a Let's Go Learn or other products that, again, will give you deficit specific. I love grade equivalents because they're so easy to explain to parents, and they're easy for educators to understand in general. It just makes sense. 3.5, midway, third grade. That's where the kiddo is. Go ahead.
Let me add something. So this is the difference between a summative assessment with a diagnostic assessment model, right? Summative says you take this test, you're at the 40 percentile, you're at the 75 percentile. That score is not tied to skills and concepts because it's testing a general area. So if I say Richard in phonics is at 20th percentile for a 7th grader or a 4th grader, what does that mean? The difference is a diagnostic assessment ties skills and concepts and stacks them in scope and sequences, and then those are tied to scores, right? So a criterion reference score can be tied. So I could say beginning sounds in kindergarten phonics is taught, that's a 0.5 level. Short vowel is taught in 1st grade, it's a 1.5. Diphthongs, I'm making this up, I think it's taught in 2nd grade, 2.5. You see what I'm saying? So I am tagging that, and that is the difference in special education, how you can achieve diagnostic assessment with criterion reference growth. Now, if I just say, Kurt took a phonics test, he's at 25 percentile for a 3rd grader. I don't know what that means. So if I get that from another district, I can't use that data. I have to retest. Now, if I got it specific at CBM and he said he took short vowel, he passed it, he took long vowel, he failed it. Now I can translate that to some kind of actionable data because I see maybe potentially 2 stacking skills, but that is usually not what you're going to get from another district. Hopefully that makes sense. It's sort of complicated and I'm probably getting too technical, but anyway, that's my job.
Thank you. The lady who wanted to unmute, she got her question answered. So now we have a question. How do we find out about more PD options and the program for our district?
So we'd be happy to send you anything you need. We do have pre-built modules, for example, for in-person and virtual, for a variety of topics such as PLAF writing, understanding internal consistency, linking, PLAF, goals, services, compensatory ed, you name it, we cover it, legal issues, instructional issues. And then we also customize based on district needs. We also perform what I call mini audits, where the district will pull maybe 10 to 20 IEPs, redact the names, and then I will perform an audit using a wonderful tool that Mitch Yell created, and we edited a little bit, but it's fantastic. Mitch is amazing. And so we then take the findings of that, and where we see opportunities for growth, we then develop the training based on those needs. So now, Linda, do we have our emails that we can put up there so any individuals who want to contact us can?
Sure, I will. I can just send it to everyone.
Yeah, and when we send it out, it'll be on there, obviously. But feel free to reach out to myself, to Richard, any questions, and if you want any information sent to you, we can obviously have that done. And any specific questions, just in the work you're doing, anything we can help, well, we do it every day, and we love it.
And also I'll mention, check the CASE website, right, Phyllis? There's PD webinars and different things going on that you guys are doing as well that people should check out.
Absolutely. You can go to the events page on the website and see other opportunities for learning as well. I will say that today's webinar was extraordinarily timely and so relevant with some of the guidance that's coming out of the U.S. Department of Education. They did release some IEP guidance. CASE is not necessarily in agreement with all of it, and you'll be hearing more about that from us. However, what is so important is that we understand exactly where each of our students is functioning as we're beginning to program for them, given that we're not out of the pandemic yet, and where we've been the last 20 plus months, and where we're going and what we're still dealing with. It is so important that the information and the present level of performance really reflects exactly where a student is currently functioning. And Let's Go Learn is a system that can really assist you in understanding where your student's at and the progress that they're making. Because we know the Andrew F. FATE standard now relies on the progress that the student is making. Is the IEP calculated effectively and reasonably so that the child can demonstrate progress in light of their circumstances? It couldn't be more important, this tool, in what we're dealing with today. So anyway, I just had to throw that in. That's really resonating with me as I'm listening, and I listen to the tips that Kurt gives. I mean, just spot on. So just thank you very much.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's a great way to wrap everything up. So thank you very much, and stay tuned to our next webinar. And